Last week, this comment came in after a video where I mentioned Jim Crow in the Navy. It's a good question. The answer touches on, among other things, the 14th Amendment that bars insurrectionists from being in the government, a president getting impeached, a close election with false claims of voter fraud, and threats of violence if the losing guy doesn't get in. All that, plus disputed slates of presidential electors. Imagine yourself in 1865. April 9th, the Civil War ends, along with 200 years of slavery, torture, debasement, and free labor in the South. Black people are free. A lot of black people are armed, and white people in the South are terrified. 6 days after the war ends, the president is murdered. 2 months after that, the new president starts taking over state governments in the South. He picks a judge who had hated secession to be the governor of Mississippi. Then he installs new governors in Georgia, Texas, Alabama, South Carolina, and Florida. But 5 months later, that governor in Mississippi is gone, and the state enacts the first black codes. The other southern states follow during the next few months. They strip away black people's rights, including the right to bear arms. In Mississippi and Alabama, there are special police forces to carry it out. So as the South is taking away black people's rights, Congress passes the 14th Amendment. It says formerly enslaved people have rights, and it bars any officer of the United States who engaged in an insurrection from holding office. Now it's the following year, 1866. The president tells all of those Southern governors that he appointed to step down. So now the Confederates are back in charge in the South. But there's a midterm election that year, and the president's party gets trounced. Congress sends troops back down south. These are the people who came to be called carpetbaggers. Now, Southern legislatures have Northern soldiers standing over them, so they repeal the black codes. Even so, no Southern police force ever stands up against white people who discriminate. Life is still awful for most black people, but at least they were allowed to vote. This is Hiram Revels, U.S. Senator from Mississippi. Congressman Benjamin Turner of Alabama. This is Samuel A. McElwee, a state legislator in Tennessee. The president had been firing all of Lincoln's cabinet secretaries, but then the new Congress voted that he couldn't do that unless the Senate gave their permission. He tried to go ahead and fire the Secretary of War anyhow, but the secretary said no, and barricades himself in his office for 2 months. The president is impeached over this whole thing because, remember, Congress said he had to ask for permission first. Now we jump ahead again 10 years, where there's a disputed presidential election. It's really close. One party screams voter fraud in Florida, Louisiana, Oregon, and South Carolina. They send alternate slates of electors to the House. People start organizing to march on the Capitol on January 6th. Then there's a deal. Rutherford B. Hayes is allowed to become president. In exchange, the government pulls all the federal troops out of the South. Every black legislator is disempowered. White legislators, who say they're fighting voter fraud, take away black people's right to vote. Riots and lynching create terror in black communities, and white governments stop funding black schools. A man named Sidney Katz got elected governor of Florida on a platform of no education for blacks. Restaurants are segregated, train cars, water fountains, bathrooms, labor unions. This is Jim Crow. It lasted almost 90 years. Real quickly, it's helpful to look at what the U.S. did in a similar situation. After World War II, the U.S. military ran Germany and Japan. Germany was split in half. Japan's entire constitution was rewritten. International war crime tribunals were set up. The Nuremberg trials for Germany, and General MacArthur set up one in Tokyo. The Germans had imposed Jewish codes. The Southern legislators created black codes. Japan and Germany had slave labor. At the end of that war, the U.S. made it stop.
America's most famous battleground is a camp again, with a road dividing the blue and gray. There is no other dividing line now.
It's always easier to demonize the bad guys when they're from another country. The end of civil wars are always all about reconciliation. But still, 150 years on, it really would have been great if America only had one standard when it comes to addressing evil.